Good to see everyone again. This time we're going to be talking about units, drawing limits, two very important aspects of using the AutoCAD system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into AutoCAD here. I'm going to change this back because I did not change my template in that last example. So drawing units. Down in the bottom right hand corner, you should see a little bar that says decimal. And if you hit the drop down, you can change it to architectural, engineering, fractional, and scientific. If you do not see something down here that says decimal, then what you're going to do is you're going to go over to the right hand side, the three bars on that bottom right corner where it says customization. And you're going to click on that, open it up, and you're going to make sure that this word units is checked on. Once you check that on, then you're going to go back down to those three lines and you're going to click to hide it away, and you should then see decimal in your tooltips down on the bottom. Alternatively, what you can do is you can go up, making sure that you have your menu bar open. Again, if you don't have your menu bar open, you come up to this top little icon here, drop that down, and make sure it'll say show menu bar at the very bottom of this fly down, and you'll click that and you'll see your menu bar. And what you can do is you can go to format and then go down to units. And what that does, if you click on that, it'll give you this drawing units box. I'm going to cancel this for one moment. Changing it down in the very bottom, you can do a quick version of that. The pop-up won't come up, but I can quickly change to architectural and quickly change to decimal or to any other unit, but I don't have control over the precision and accuracy components of those elements. So the best way to do that is to come up to format and go down to units, or alternatively, I think the easiest way is to actually type the word units. So making sure hit escape a couple of times that you're not in a command. Type the word units, U-N-I-T-S, hit enter, and your drawing units box will pop up. So taking a look at this, couple things to notice here. We have length and angle, so two different areas, length on the left-hand side, angle on the right-hand side. Then sort of in the middle, we have the insertion scale. Lighting we're not going to worry about because this really has to do with three-dimensional modeling. On the very bottom, we have okaying, canceling, and we have a little bar for direction. So currently what AutoCAD does is it considers the right hand, if you put a big plus sign, the right hand or the east would be 0 degrees. And then north would be 90 degrees, west would be 180, south would be 270, and east would be again 360 or back to 0. So we can change the direction of that. If you're doing something with civil engineering, then you might want to change the direction so that north is 0 degrees. If you're doing azimuth type directions or bearings, then that might be a good way to put that into play. Otherwise, we keep east as 0 degrees. So basically, if you want anything in feet and inches, decimal wise, we're going to keep this in decimal. We have the precision. This is currently set to 4 decimal places, and we can hit the drop down and we can change the precision of our drawing units that we input. So in other words, as we draw, we have to tell AutoCAD, oh, I want this to be 2 inches or 3 inches or 27 inches or 58 inches. Okay, and we can input the precision by selecting one of these precisions. Usually it's going to be 2 to 3 decimal places. All right, so I would probably say let's default to 3 decimal places. That's a good default to have. For angle, you have decimal degrees, degrees, minutes, and seconds, grads and radians, and surveyor's units. So same thing for most of the drawings that we're going to do in this CAD 110 and CAD 100 cores is going to be decimal degrees. So, and the precision for that should probably stay at 0, since we're not really working with any precision, any other precision other than that. All right, insertion scale. You can see unit lists, inches, feet, U.S. survey feet, miles, millimeters, centimeters, right? A whole bunch of, you can even go into light years if you like to, and parsecs. However, basically we work in inches and in millimeters, okay? And those are the easiest ones. We're not even going to mess with the other scales, and I will show you why when we get into metric, but basically inches is what you want, and you're going to click OK. All right, now that we've got the units figured out, the next thing I want to talk about is drawing limits. So drawing limits is an imaginary boundary line, if you will. Now, we can go outside of that boundary line, and it's not going to matter too much. But the default boundary line is 12 inches by 9 inches. So what that means is if I zoom extents to the extent of my screen, all right? And I know you guys aren't sure what that means exactly yet, but I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit zoom extents. And what that does is it extends to 12 inches by 9 inches, everything that's on my screen. So in theory, right, I have an invisible border, and I'm going to draw a rectangle really quick, starting at 0, 0, and I'm hitting enter. And then I'm going to go out on the X 12 inches, hit tab, and I'm going to go 9 in the Y direction. So this is my limit. This is my drawing limit, right? So in theory, that means that whatever I'm drawing should fit inside this box. Now, as I scroll my mouse wheel or roll my mouse wheel back and forth, you can see that box getting smaller and bigger depending on how I use my mouse wheel. Without this box, it's very difficult to know where you are in the grid, because sometimes the grid will readjust itself. And it's kind of hard to tell. And many students, sometimes when they're drawing, they can't find their drawing because they're either zoomed in way too far or they're zoomed out way too far, and their drawing is really, really small. So it's good to know where this boundary is. You can change the boundary based on what it is that you're drawing. So if you're drawing something architectural, let's say a building, and that building is 100 feet by 60 feet, then you have to adjust your drawing limits. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in units, and my box pops up, and I'm going to change this to architectural. And again, we have a precision that we can change to 1/8 of an inch, 1/16, a 32nd, a half, or just whole numbers. And for this, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to say a 1/16 of an inch and hit OK. I'm not changing this to feet. Inches is absolutely sufficient, and it makes more sense to leave it in inches for architectural. So I'm going to hit OK. So typing in architectural units is a little bit different. But basically, if I wanted to change my drawing limits, and I have a building that is 100 by 60 feet, then I need to make my drawing limits a little bit larger than that. So again, starting from the first corner point, I'm going to start at 0, 0, and hit enter. And again, I'm using the tab key to switch between the different fields, the X field and the Y field. And you can see that the numbers that are in my dynamic input are fractional. All right, and if I zoom out a little bit, you can see they're going into feet and inches automatically, and that's what we want. So if my building is 100 by 60, I might want to go 100 feet. Don't forget the apostrophe. And then, excuse me, let's make that 120 feet. There we go. Give me some room. And 70 feet in the Y. Again, don't forget the apostrophe. And this time hit enter. And now you can see that those lines have extended themselves to 120 feet by 70 feet. So in theory, this is my new border. So if I hit my zoom extents, you can see where my 120 foot by 70 foot border is, and it is realistic, right? You can see my 9 by 12. This is almost a foot, or a foot by 9 inches. And you can see the reality of the scale. So this now becomes my new invisible border for drawing limits. So how do I actually change my drawing limits? Well, for that, you're going to type the word limits, L-I-M-I-T-S, and hit enter. And you're not going to see a pop-up, but you will get instructions either in your dynamic input or in your command line. Specify the lower left corner. And the lower left corner should always be 0, 0. So I would do 0, tab, 0, and hit enter. And then the prompt is asking me to specify the upper right corner, right? So depending on the size of whatever it is that you're modeling or drawing, you need to go a little bit larger than that and put in those drawing limits. So again, I'm going to say 120 feet, hit tab to go to the next box, and 70 feet, and hit enter. So I've just changed the drawing limits. All right, so I can erase this now. And I'll erase this one, and I'll leave my little box here. And if I go to my zoom all, right, so zoom all basically is going to my limits. And we can see that the little box in the bottom corner, our original limits, are there. They're in scale or in proportion to our drawing limits that we've set. Can you go outside of the drawing limits? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with going outside of the limits. From time to time, the software might get stuck in terms of where the screen location is. So you may have to kind of pan left and right or zoom in and out to readjust the entire screen. So I'm going to change my drawing limits to back to the original state, and I'll show you the second way to do that. So I'm going to go back to Format up in my menu bar, and I'm going to come down to Drawing Limits, and 0, 0 is my lower left corner, and 12 inches without any apostrophe by 9 inches without any apostrophe. I hit enter. And now I do zoom all. Now I go back to my original limits. I'll erase this really quick. And that is working with drawing limits.